most people think about the achievement gap, the word that we usually hear is closing the achievement gap. And a lot of people who are in the movement to eliminate the achievement gap really doesn't like that language because the problem is that we have an achievement gap at all. So there are a lot of different programs that are focusing on now eliminating the achievement gap. And one of the main leaders on this front is Jeff Canada. And so I'm actually going to show you a short clip of him at an education forum because I think he really sums up the problem. So we'll just watch this very quickly. Give it a second.
This is what I think part of the dilemma is. It's hard to find enough teachers who can just teach. I mean, forget being social workers, just teach prominent subject areas, right? I mean, people don't understand how hard teaching is. Yeah. I mean, it is really, really hard. And so then you have to have all of these other things. Now, if I got a student that I know is coming into my school, and after I finish with that kid, they've got to walk 4 blocks. And as they walk down those 4 blocks, they're going to be threatened down 2 of the blocks. They're afraid the kids are going to beat them up. And someone's going to try and sell them drugs down the 3rd block. And the 4th block, they're going to see all kinds of things and hear all kinds of things that a 12-year-old shouldn't hear. And if I don't think that's going to have an impact on that child, and that child hears that day after day after day, year after, are you going to tell me that that is not going to impact what happens to that kid? Absolutely it's going to impact what happens in school. So even if I'm a great teacher, can I overcome all of that? Sometimes the answer is yes, but let me tell you how I tell people. This is, and people used to ask me this all the time, this is a little bit like resilience theory. Why do some kids come from the heart of the ghetto and make it? Right? People say, if we could only study that, then we would know what we could do. And I say, no. I was a psych major in undergraduate, and we used to listen to studies like they used to throw rats into a vat of water and see how long the rat could swim. Right? And they would just figure out, well, why do some rats give up and drown, and others keep swimming? Well, you know what? If you care anything about rats, just don't throw them in the water. So
that's Jeffrey Canada. So this is the main problem that we're facing. I think a lot of people, when they're addressing the issue, they don't really realize the root of the problem. So the root of the problem is a historical inequality that we're facing today. And so I think that you brought a lot of good points about social emotional learning, is that these are issues that these types of kids are facing. They have a lot of social problems that are affecting them in the classroom. So a lot of times when we think about the achievement gap, we talk about test scores and we talk about what's going on as far as why these kids aren't performing up to snuff with the other students. But we're not really analyzing what their lives are like going back home and how that's addressing how they perform in the classroom. So students are starting behind. So the average African-American child goes to school on the first day knowing around 800 words, while the average white child goes to school knowing around 5,000. So a lot of these problems are starting in the home. And so the purpose is that we need to do is create a culture of education within our communities, but especially in underserved communities who have a history of underperformance in our school system. Another statistic is that by the 4th grade, Black and Latino students are on average nearly 3 years behind their white and Asian counterparts. So the reason why I bring up these statistics is because there's a test that students take at the end of 3rd grade in a lot of different cities. And based upon the results of that test, if students aren't literate by the end of 3rd grade, it's something like 95% of those students end up in the penal system. Because after 3rd grade, it's that much harder for these students to become literate. And so actually the way that we, Dean may be able to test this, but actually the way that we determine how big our prisons are going to be is that they look at these tests and then they post-date to say, okay, we need this many cells because this number of people are going to end up being in the penal system. So then, after the early childhood education stats, the problem only gets worse. So 90% of incoming freshmen at the top, 150 colleges come from families in the top half of the U.S. annual income. Nearly half of African-American and Latino students graduate from high school, 55% for Latinos, 51%, and obviously 76% for their white counterparts. Black and Latino students are 2 to 3 times more likely to be below basic skills in reading and math, which are all fundamental elements. And so a lot of times we take these statistics from high schools, or we talk about these students after they drop out, or once they're underperforming in high school or in middle school. But the problem is, by the time they get to this area, I mean, if you talk about social emotional learning, it's kind of too late at this point. A lot of the social inequalities, they've already experienced these things, but then we come into this, they have educational disparities as well. So here you are, a young male in 7th grade, and you're not grasping the material because you never learned it in the first place. Well, a lot of times, what other outlet do these kids have to be productive in school? So they start acting up, so they start getting in trouble, and sometimes they get kicked out of school. So we look at these kids and we say, these kids are troublemakers. But the reality is they're just too embarrassed to ask a question. You're in 7th grade, and maybe you can't read what's on the board. What other outlet do you have in class but to act up and make a distraction and try to divert some attention to yourself because it seems like no one cares that you're underachieving. And so these are some student and risk factors as well that we have to analyze. So, you guys can kind of prove these, but, children in poverty, you have 31% African American, you have 9.3% white. Children with no parent in the labor force, 20% black, 5.5% white. Closest students with repeat grades, 17% black, 8.2% white. So these are statistics that we see across our country, and most of these statistics actually come from the national census. And so the reason why I have the PowerPoint is to show the disparity, but the key to my presentation, the leadership style that I'm looking at, is what Jeffrey Cannon is doing in the Harlem Children's Zone. So he's taken 27 blocks, and over 10 years, he's cultivated this chunk of land, and everybody who's in this chunk of Harlem gets access to his educational programs. And so the main program that I'm focusing on is this program called Baby College. So this is a program where the mothers in this area actually go to classes during their pregnancy, but also right after they have their children, to learn about how do you educate children from in the womb to their very early, developmental stages of birth. And one of the main programs is getting, these mothers to read to their children in the womb, and especially, once they're born, for at least 15 minutes a day. And I know this may sound, elemental to the people here who are at Tufts, but this is something that is a culture that's precedented. So you have a lot of these mothers who are in low-income jobs, who may not get to spend a lot of time with their children at home. A lot of these kids are being raised by teachers or in daycares, and these mothers don't find the time every day to take time and read to their kids. You go home, you may see bookshelves and books on the shelves. Something that Jeffrey Canada speaks about is that, a lot of times when he goes into the home of these parents, is that there's not a book in the house. And so, working with programs to get these parents access to books and allowing these students to come to school equipped on the very first day to at least compete with the other students. So before we even fix our educational system, we have to fix our early childhood education and educating parents to be effective and efficient in educating their children. Moreover, once the children get older, he offers incentivized education. So trips to Disneyland, allowances, etc., for his students to perform well in school. And while a lot of people disagree with this approach, you have to understand that when you're facing a populace of students who are so far behind, sometimes it's okay. They have these large competitions. And so the students who read the most amount of books, or the students who network in their community to raise their test scores the highest, get these incentivized trips to experience things that they would not experience without this experience. And so the reason why Jeffrey Canada has been so effective is because he's just a highly charismatic leader who had a focus, and who, when other people told him he couldn't do it, continued to fight for his dream and for his goal. And now he has an extremely large endowment and an extremely large following in his area. And recently, I wanted to show you a clip of the speech, I don't have time, but Barack Obama actually made a speech where he wants to implement this exact same program in 20 cities across America. So the crux of my presentation is that we can eliminate the achievement gap, but we will still have one. And so we have to get these students as early as possible.